Tyranid players, I am here for you. I love Tyranids, they're freaking awesome, and I am really excited to dive into this video. We're going to be talking all about the Subterranean Assault. If you have ever felt like it's just not clicking, like for whatever reason, we're just not figuring out how to make this seemingly unbelievably OP detachment work, well, today the video is for you. If you're a Tyranid player and you have been frustrated by the fact that Tyranids just feel like they don't operate, this video is for you. I have been very, very interested in the snakes and the Tyranids in general for quite a while, because for me, looking as an outsider into the Tyranids army, which I don't have a whole lot of experience playing, I've always felt that they have all the tools that they need, even though I hear from people that they don't. So I decided it's time to start exploring them. So I recently took them to a GT. I did quite well with them, and now I am going to be altering a few things so that I'm going to start crushing with the Tyranids. So similar to what I did with Dark Angels, I created a list and a new archetype for the way that Dark Angels operate now. I'm trying to see if I can do the same thing for Tyranids. So I'm going to talk all about the Subterranean Assault, because I do believe it's one of the best attachments in the freaking game. And I'm going to talk about how we're going to run it. I'm going to use TTS to demonstrate how to move up the board with it. I'll talk about the stratagems, the enhancements, what units love the detachment. I'm going to talk about what army list I'm currently running, and I'm going to recommend it to you as well. I'm going to break it all down. Anything you've ever wanted to know about Subterranean Assault, let's get into it. All right. So the army rule. Basically what happens, you're going to get these units called burrowers, okay? Or I'm sorry, this is the detachment rule. These burrowers. Burrowers are raveners, molochs, trigons, hyper-adapted raveners, snakes. The way this detachment works is I tend to tell my opponent, just basically assume that I've got a 6-inch deep strike on everything, because you more or less have a 6-inch deep strike on everything. So when one of your burrowers come out of reserves, they're going to create a token within 1 inch of themselves and outside of 3 inches of the opponent. It's a 40mm token. At that point in time, anything in your army that is currently in reserves, it doesn't matter if they're in strat reserves, deep strike, doesn't matter, can come out of that tunnel wholly within 9 inches of it and outside of 6 inches of your opponent. Now, there are no other restrictions on this, meaning you can shoot and you can charge out of it. It's very, very powerful. This enables a lot of units in the Tyranids Codex that typically can't really be utilized. One of which, the Screamer Killer, which a lot of people hate the Screamer Killer because he's so hard to transport, just because he's slow, he has to come out of strat reserves. But from a datasheet perspective, he's actually quite good. 2-up arm save, T9, 10 attacks at strength 10, AP2 damage 3, and he can cause battle shocks when he shoots. On a datasheet perspective, he's actually quite good, but he's just so hard to deliver that most of the time he's not a good datasheet. But in this detachment, he's awesome. So what I want you thinking right off the bat is that in this detachment, you get to utilize units that you might not be able to utilize in other detachments. Okay, another thing about these little tunnel markers is that you can actually string them. So you can create a tunnel marker and then use your 6 inches to create another tunnel marker, or use your 6 inches to create another tunnel marker, whereas you might not have been able to do that with a typical 9-inch deep strike. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate that on TTS so you guys can see that in just a little bit, but just get that whirling in your head. So if you're confused by how that works, don't worry, I'm going to show it to you as well. The next part of the detachment rule is just you get to re-roll hit rolls of 1. Just because, which by itself is actually pretty decent. So this is actually a very, very good detachment. It gives you a lot of benefits. Now, let me take 1 second to address the Shadow in the Warp. The Shadow in the Warp is one of the army rules that I hear people complain about the most in 40K, because they say it just doesn't just work. You have to do things to support it, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, it does just work. Now, there are things that you should do to bias the Shadows in the Warp to be able to lean into it to make it more effective. But let me give you an example of this. I'm going to give you an example of a detachment rule that everyone knows, Oath of Moment. Now, Oath of Moment is re-roll hit rolls on one target, which is good. But any army that wants to effectively utilize Oath of Moment, guess what they're going to do? They're going to try to figure out enhancements, stratagems, units that have access to lethal hits, sustained hits, so that they can really start fishing for those lethal hits and sustained hits. Armies want to lean into Oath of the Moment. They actually lean into their faction rule so that they can make it more effective. Shadows in the Warp is exactly the same. You use it, everything in your opponent's army takes a battle shock test. But it gets so much better when we lean into it. Similar to Oath of the Moment, if you're not stacking Oath of the Moment with units that have sustained hits and lethal hits and stuff, it's going to be a lot less effective than if you are stacking it. So, Shadow in the Warp, what we want to do is we want to just start leaning into it. This is not me claiming it's the best army rule in the game, but it is me claiming that it is a good army rule still. So when we lean into it, it becomes much more effective. In the list I'm going to show you today, I can get my opponents taking their battle shocks at 3. Now, for those of you who are not Tyranid mains and you're just watching this, you might have the question, how is that possible, Jonathan? I thought the core rule said you cannot modify a leadership characteristic to 9. And you're not wrong. But you can modify the battle shock roll beyond that. So I can provide a modifier to your leadership, and then I can provide modifier to the battle shock rolls, which will stack. So I can have you on a -4, a -3, a -4 battle shock test, which will require you to roll things like 10s, 11s. And so that's what I want to do when I'm utilizing the Shadow and the Warp. Now, many of you might not want to do that, but I'm telling you how to freaking play Subterranean Assault the way that I see it. And this does play, and I'm going to continue running it, and I'm going to continue placing better and better at GTs as I continue to do it. Okay, so we want to lean into Shadows of the Warp. I lean into it first off with a Neuro Tyrant. You're going to take a Neuro Tyrant in every single Tyranid's freaking army that you're ever going to play. And if you don't, you're a psychopath. That doesn't mean I hate you. It just means that you're a psychopath. You might be an amazing psychopath, but you're still a psychopath. So it's no different than any other army rule. We want to lean into it. Okay, cool. Let's start talking about Subterranean Assault, specifically the strengths of this detachment. The strengths of Tyranids in general as well in this detachment is you just have very cheap units with extremely solid stratagems. We've got an unbelievable amount of infiltrating, stealth, lone-op character. They're not even characters, just lone-op units in between our lictors and our neurolictors. So you can have 6 lone-ops that are not characters, which is just bonkers. Then you add the Death Leaper, and that's 7 lone-ops. And then you can add in Von Ryan Leapers, which are also infiltrators. Like, you can have an unbelievable amount of pre-game units. Units that get to scout. Units that get to infiltrate. This is actually more than I think any other army in the game. This is a huge strength of the Tyranids army, and Subterranean Assault is going to make use of this, just like anything else. You have very, very good synergies in Subterranean Assault, similar to how you do in the rest of the Tyranids army as well. But in Subterranean Assault, we have some fantastic synergies. For example, one of our stratagems, which we're going to go over in a little bit, can give you sustained hits, and it can give you ignore cover. That's kind of amazing on things like Zone Throats, who already have lethal hits, who can already reroll hit rolls of 1 from the detachment roll. So you have all these synergies that you can build out, and I recommend you lean into them. You also have very, very wild mobility when you're playing Tyranids. It gets even more crazy when you're playing Subterranean Assault. But if you just, from a broad stance, you've got guys who just move fast. You've got infantry that goes fast. You've got unbelievable pregame movement like we already discussed. It's very, very interesting. Just a normal foot hive tyrant can give your entire army assault and lethal hits. Like, these speed and the synergies in Tyranids is actually very, very intense if you care to look for it. All right, now Subterranean Assault, it obviously gets bonkers due to our deep striking, and everything just has more or less a 6-inch deep strike. Subterranean Assault be good. All right, you've also got plenty of access to CP generation, and this is a big warning I have to you Subterranean Assault players out there. You need CP generation, whether that is a foot tyrant, a winged hive tyrant who's going to be discounting a stratagem once per battle round, or the Swarm Lord who's going to be giving you an additional CP. All of these are actually reasonable and good choices that you can take in this detachment, because Subterranean Assault uses its stratagems. It's got very good stratagems, and it will be abusing them constantly. So you have to have CP generation to make this army function. And the next big strength that you have for Tyranids is an incredible flexibility and viable builds. You can run triple Norns in like 4 different detachments. You can run Monster Mash. You can run Infantry Carpets. You can run all sorts of things in Tyranids. And this is a huge strength. So when you're building out your Subterranean Assault army, you just need to make sure that it fits the mold. Now let's talk about some of the weaknesses of Subterranean Assault. Here we go. One very big weakness, and this is actually very true, is the concept of you're lacking a traditional elite infantry unit. You don't have a Terminators unit in this army. You don't have that melee bruiser that can just punch decently hard and take a huge punch and just remain standing. It just doesn't really exist in Tyranids. I think the closest you have is the Tyrant Guard, but they're so slow. They don't have access to Deep Strike, except for in Subterranean Assault. They don't have like a lot of the OC that some of these other units have. They don't have the invulnerable saves. They are relatively tough with the T8, but you don't really have that traditional elite infantry bruiser like you do in other armies. And that is actually a weakness. Now, typically, the way Tyranid players get around this is by taking your big freaking monsters, which can kind of take this role, but that gets a little bit challenging when it comes to movement, because It's hard for them if you're playing on WTC you can't get the barricade rule because they're not an infantry or a beast, so you don't get the 2-inch engagement on the walls. If you're playing GW, the walls are even a bigger issue because the way those angles work, it can make things confusing with big monsters. So this actually is a bit of a weakness for Tyranids. No problem admitting that. You're also exceptionally CP sensitive as a Tyranid player, specifically in Subterranean Assault, but this is fixable, kind of as we have already discussed when it comes to the types of units that we're going to be included. And you're also very, very susceptible to screening. Now, this is the big one for Subterranean Assault. A lot of people out there tell me, oh, well, one unit of infiltrators with a 12-inch deep strike denial just shut the army down. It's not actually true. It is important to recognize, but it's actually not true. I played 2 different matches this past weekend where the opponent had infiltrators, and I just was able to get through them. It does take a little doing, but it's not true that one unit of infiltrators with a 12-inch deep strike denial shuts you down. As a matter of fact, I would say Subterranean Assault is one of the armies that cares the least about screening because we have the ability to get through screens, which is a very, very cool thing. But this is a typical Tyranid weakness. All right, so let's start talking about some of the enhancements of Subterranean Assault. We're going to do the enhancements and the stratagems. I'm going to give you some feedback on individual units, which really, really love them. And then I'm going to hit the TTS screen. I'm going to show you how actually we're going to move up the tabletop, and I'll show you my current list, which I recommend that you guys give a try. All right, enhancements. The first enhancement we have is the Trigon Prime. This is +1 strength, +1 weapon skill, and gain synapse. I take this enhancement. This is not required for Subterranean Assault, but I take this enhancement because I like having the extra synapse on a big snake. And a Trigon with +1 weapon skill, rerolling hit rolls of 1, means it's hitting on 2s, rerolling hit rolls of 1 at a strength of 11 with AP2 damage 3 is really, really good. It gains +1 strength from the enhancement, and then you get +1 strength in melee from being a synapse unit. It's actually a very, very big deal. This man cleaves through people, especially if you want to give him sustained hits when he comes in from reserves. Then he can have 12 attacks hitting on 2s, rerolling hit rolls of 1, sustained hits, strength 11, AP2 damage 3. There's basically nothing in the game that cleaves through elite infantry quite as efficiently as this guy, and I love him. He also serves another purpose, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when I go to the list, is he has a native 6-inch deep strike. Now, this kind of sucks because he can't charge out of his native 6-inch deep strike, but occasionally your opponent is able to screen your initial 9-inch deep strike for Subterranean Assault, so that Trigon can come in there to be a 6-inch deep strike initially to create the first token to enable the 6-inch deep strikes for everyone else. So this is a thing worth considering. It's a very expensive way of making that happen, but it can be worth it at times. Okay, Vanguard Intellect. This is another very good enhancement. It's a turn 1 deep strike. I put this on my hyper-adapted Raveners almost all the time because it gives you a guaranteed tunnel creation in turn 1. Now, typically, if we go second, this is not a problem, which we'll get to in strats because we can uppy downy in this detachment. But if we go first, we can be at kind of a little bit of an issue because we're not getting our tunnels made early, and we really need our tunnels made early in this detachment. So I do take a turn 1 deep strike on a unit. Typically, it's going to be on my hyper-adapted Raveners. And it is worth noting that this is a turn 1 deep strike. This does not allow you to turn 1 rapid ingress, so please keep that in mind. All right, the next enhancement is called Tremor Sense, which is a redeploy 3 units. I do not take this. I think this is just generally not particularly useful, although there are use cases for it, especially if you're playing the infiltrator game. You can put all your infiltrators out there to block your opponent's infiltrators, and then you can redeploy them elsewhere. So it's not useless. It's just something I haven't found particularly useful. And then lastly, you've got the Synaptic Strategy, which is a free rapid ingress, even if another rapid ingress has already been done. This is also quite a good enhancement. I am not currently taking it, but if I was going to run, say, like a double Trigon list, I would put the Trigon Prime on one. I would put this on the other Trigon to guarantee that it gets to rapid ingress for free, in addition to another unit that's going to rapid ingress. And don't forget, your hyper adapted Raveners already get to rapid ingress for free, even if another unit has done it. So you can conceivably do a 2, 3, even a 4 rapid ingress army in the same turn. You can get up to 4 rapid ingresses, which is kind of crazy when you consider these things. Okay, cool. Let's go on into your strats. There's 6 strats, shockingly, I know. We have adaptive optimization. You make a Moloch or a Trigon Synapse in the command phase. This is good because these big monsters have bad leadership, so occasionally you just have to pass the battle shock test, or you want to put your opponent in your Shadows with Warp, so you're trying to position for that. So it's a useful strat. It's not something I use every single game, but it's worth noting. Then we have Replenishing Swarms. This stratagem is quite cool because it enables a lot of different builds. This stratagem is why Norns become particularly interesting in your whatever detachment we're talking about right now, Subterranean Assault. Because when you utilize this stratagem, you get to regenerate either D3+1 wounds or D3+1 models if you're targeting a unit that has a wound characteristic of 1. So we're talking Neurogons, Hormigons, Gargoyles, Termagants. If you're using it on the littles, this is great because now you can regenerate in the command phase and you can like actually take objectives. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. Pardon me. This is in the move phase, so you can't do that. Sorry. Pardon me. Just ignore that last part. But this is still very, very useful for things like Norns, okay? When you're using it on things like Norns, these guys are 16 wounds, 2 up armor save, 4 up invuln, 5 up field of pain on your opponent's objective. And when your opponent does start to get them through, get them whittled down, then you just heal D3+1 wounds every single turn. It basically turns them into a budget Satan that hits harder, which is pretty awesome. Not to mention, Norns love this detachment because you just get to reroll hit rolls of 1, and they hit on 2s natively, and you really want them getting their damage through. That's kind of a very, very big deal. The last reason why we really like Norns in this detachment is because your Norns have the ability to 6-inch deep strike. So they're going to get onto their chosen objective in this detachment, which is a very, very cool thing. If you've ever really wanted to run the Assimilator, this is the detachment to do it in because the Assimilator can get that 6-inch deep strike, hit with its harpoon, get the +2 to charge, so now it's got its 4-inch deep strike charge effectively. Okay, so Replenishing Swarms is a very, very good stratagem, but it's used in the movement phase, which is kind of like frustrating. You would really like it to be used in the command phase. Then it is what it is. All right, Enflating Emergence. This is an incredible stratagem. Any unit set up reserves, you get sustained hits and ignore cover. This thing rocks. You're always going to be spamming this on your 6-man unit of Zoanthropes. That's going to be led by the Neurotyrant. Pardon me, guys. I just hit my microphone. Sorry about that. I got excited when I was talking about this unit of Zoanthropes. This unit of Zoanthropes is going to be basically teleporting across the battlefield using a stratagem we're going to talk about next. And they're going to be getting these 6-inch deep strike teleports, and they're going to be both lethal hits and sustain hits and ignore cover on their hitting on 2s, re-rolling hit rolls of 1 las cannons. This is extremely powerful and extremely effective for being really what's probably going to be your main source of anti-tank in this list. Of course, you could always take things like Tyrannofexes and things as well in Subterranean Assault, but I tend to find that you just don't need it. All right, let's talk about the other strats, and this is going to explain why we don't really necessarily need the Tyrannofexes, although that's not a bad strategy to bring Tyrannofexes. All right, we have the tunnel network. This is basically the hallmark of your entire detachment. Oh, geez, I need to fix this so you guys can see it. Pardon me. We'll do it like that. Okay, so teleport wholly within 9 inches of a tunnel marker to wholly within 9 inches of another tunnel marker outside of 6 inches of the enemies, and you can't be in engagement range. Basically, what this means is you choose a tunnel marker, and you choose a second tunnel marker, and you teleport from tunnel marker A to tunnel marker B, effectively giving you a teleport, like outside of 6 of your opponent's deployment zone. It's very easy to make this work. You can always just come in with a burrower unit to create a tunnel nearby the unit that you want to teleport, and then you can just use another burrower unit to create the second tunnel, and then you get a 6-inch teleportation. I use this on my Zoanthropes turn 1, turn 2, basically every single game. It's extremely powerful. It's extremely, extremely good. There's no restriction on this. You can use it on any unit, which is good. And then since you're doing this teleport, and since you're being set up on the table, you do count as arriving from reserves due to core rules commentary, which means any repositioned unit, this would be a repositioned unit, does count as arriving from reserves for rules purposes, which means, yes, Infiltrator's 12-inch deep strike denial bubble will work on you, but it also means that you can combine this with your sustained hits and ignore cover stratagem, so you can get a lot of damage. And this is why you guys are starting to notice why we really need CP generation, because you always want to be teleporting one of these units, and you always want to be giving them sustained hits and ignore cover, which means that's a 2 CP strategy that you want to be spamming. So you need CP generation in this army. Then we've got Swarming Assault, a monster arriving from reserves. They gain a 6-inch aura of reroll charges. This is extremely important for when you're trying to land all of these 6-inch deep strike charges. Very, very relevant. You need to be utilizing this stratagem. And then lastly, we have the Retreat Below, which is uppy downy 1 unit or 2 burrower units. I use this stratagem every single turn. If you go second, that means you can get turn 1 deep strikes with your units, with a lot of your units. So I can have my Molochs. So basically what I always do is I always start 2 Molochs on the board. I use the stratagem on them if at the end of my opponent's fight phase, which means if I go second, they get to deep strike turn 1, which means they can do their mortals in turn 1 if I need to clear screens. It also means I'm creating lots of tunnel markers in turn 1, so I'm going to have plenty of tunnel markers for the entire game. This is one of the big reasons why I'm including the Hive Tyrant to allow for that. Okay, so let's talk about my current list, and then I'm going to go to the TTS screen, and I'm going to show you how I would actually operate on the battlefield, how I would move up the battlefield. So my current list that I'm running right now is I'm running a Death Leaper. He's amazing. Does a bunch of things in this army. One, he has Infiltrate, which I think is just one of the most powerful rules in the entire game. If you guys know anything about the way I build lists, I always include infiltrators. I think if you don't bring infiltrators, you're a psychopath. You might be a lovely person, but you're a psychopath. But Death Leaper in particular, he's got that same fights first that your normal lictors have, but he also has a 3-up armor save, and he also has a 4-up invulnerable save, which makes him very, very durable. He's also stealth, so he's a stealth, fights first, low and up model, which is a beast for your opponents to actually deal with, especially when it comes to skirmishing. But then his ability, oh my goodness gracious, his ability is what really does it for me. It's so dang strong, and if you haven't been playing around with Tyranids and you haven't run into the Death Leaper, ooh, allow me to explain. So the Death Leaper has the ability to every enemy unit that is within 6 inches of this model, you get to worsen their leadership characteristic by 1. In addition to this, in the Battle Shock step of your opponent's command phase, if any enemy unit is below its starting strength, it must take a Battle Shock. So what I use the Death Leaper for is I use him to really set up my Shadows in the Warp turn. Wherever the concentration of units is that I know I desperately need them to start failing Battle Shock, or this is where I ideally need my opponents to be failing Battle Shocks, I'm going to be advancing or charging the Death Leaper within 6 inches of those units, using my pylons and consolidates, doing whatever I need to do to get those units within his aura. Because when they're within his aura, they're going to be at -1 to their leadership. Which means when I Shadows in the Warp, I'm automatically going to have everything on the battlefield taking a Battle Shock test at -1, but now they're at -1 leadership, so they're effectively at -2 to this test. And if I happen to have a Synapse creature, hint, I will, because it's probably going to be like a Neurolictor or something along those lines, they're going to be at -3 to their Battle Shock. When you get to -3 on a Battle Shock, things fail Battle Shock relatively reliably. That is very, very powerful. It's a very big deal because now my Neurolictors are also providing this aura of my entire army gets +1 to wound you, you're -1 to hit me. It becomes very, very brutal. Not to mention, the Death Leaper also gives you a second chance to get your opponent to fail their Battle Shock, right? Because the Shadows in the Warp goes off, but then anything in the normal Battle Shock step still will have to take Battle Shock. So if they're under half starting strength, they're still going to have to take Battle Shock. So even if they pass the Shadows in the Warp Battle Shock, they still have to take a normal Battle Shock. But the Death Leaper makes you take Battle Shocks if you're just -1, or I'm sorry, pardon me, if you're just under starting strength naturally. So you don't even have to be below half starting strength. So it gives me way more Battle Shock tests. He typically will die after this happens, but that's okay because he's now served his purpose. All right, I don't need to go that long on in depth for every unit. I just needed to do it in Death Leaper for you guys to understand how to position him. He is kind of a suicide bomber, and that's okay. Then I take one squad of hyper-adapted Raveners. I do lead them with other Raveners because what happens here is the Raveners give them a free uppy downy, and the hyper-adapted Raveners give them sustained hits and free heroic intervention or free rapid ingress. This is very, very important for how the list functions. This is your bomb. This is the unit that you drop down that goes and murders the thing that needs to be murdered. They also are just going to be uppy downing, creating lots of tunnels. Since they have access to the free rapid ingress, they can create big struggles for your opponents, and they can save you a little bit on your CP cost as well. So this is the bomb unit that's going to go in and murder the thing that needs murderizing. Then we have the Neuro Tyrant. As I said, the Neuro Tyrant will be in every Tyranids list, or he should be in every Tyranids list. He's going to be leading the Zoanthropes for those hitting on 2s, because he gives +1 to hit to his unit, re-rolling hit rolls of 1, lethals, and a lot of times sustain and ignore cover, las cannons. It also makes him a monster. It's such a big deal. He also gives the monster keyword to the unit, so now the Zoanthropes can even shoot into combat if they're tagged in combat, which is a very big deal as well. We have a Winged Hive Tyrant. I know a lot of people hate the Winged Hive Tyrant, and I like him though. He's good, he's cheap, he's fast, he actually hits pretty decently hard in melee. He's got that 2-up armor save, that 4-up invulnerable save. He gives you the free CP generation that you need to be functioning. I am actually a pretty big fan of the Winged Hive Tyrant. I will say it can be challenging at times to hide him because of his wingspan. It can make things a little bit difficult, a little bit tricky, but it's still doable. And this is what really enables the list, because his free stratagem that he gets to use once per battle round will always enable your, your uppy downies and things like this, because this army needs so much CP. If you don't take him, you need to take a Foot Tyrant, which is more expensive and less maneuverable. And this is not really a shooty list that I'm running, so I'm not taking a Foot Tyrant. Now, if you are going to be running more of a shooty list, maybe you will be taking a Foot Tyrant. And that's okay. The other option, if you don't take either of those, is you kind of need the Swarm Lord. Because the Swarm Lord will just generate you an extra CP. But I'd rather have a discounted CP, because then I could also still discard, secondary cards that I'm not going to score to get more CP. So I'd rather not take the Swarm Lord, but there are going to be builds where you like the Swarm Lord. But for me, I'm taking the Winged Tyrant. All right, lastly, we have that Trigon with the enhancement. We've already spoken about him. His job is to go murder elite infantry like it's no one's business. And in the niche scenario where I really need a 6-inch deep strike to initiate the first tunnel marker, that's what he'll do for me. I have a 10-man squad of Hormiguts. This is my trash. This is the stuff that I'm going to shoot out just to deny my opponent's primary or to get myself my area denial, things like this. That's my trash. I have a unit of Biovore, a single Biovore. Every Tyranid player is going to take a Biovore. He creates the Spore Mines. The Spore Mines are stopping your opponent's deep strikes. The Spore Mines are stopping your opponent from ending advance rolls. The Spore Mines are just there to kind of control the battlefield and get you your turn 1 behind enemy lines and lose you the game when you play Purge the Foe. That's what they're there for. But it's a very, very useful unit. You have to have it. After that, I'm going to have 2 Neurolictors and 1 Lictor. Now, what you'll notice is that this list is a 1990 list, so I could just take 3 Neurolictors, but for me, I really like having the normal Lictor for the free heroic intervention with the fights first. I just like it a lot. All these guys are infiltrate, they're all lone up, they're all stealth. The Lictor fights first, and he hits pretty hard. The Neurolictor has a 4-up invulnerable save and makes things -1 to hit when they're battle shocked within 12 inches, and makes my army +1 to wound them when they're when they're battle shocked within 12 of the Neurolictor. So I like 2 Neurolictors and I like 1 Lictor. You can run that how you want. That's why I take them. All right. Then I run 2 squads of Raveners. One will be attached to the hyper-adapted Raveners. The other Raveners is just a Burrower token. They're just creating my tunnel markers for me. And then they're also just a decent little skirmisher. Sometimes I need to throw a unit into a position to kill a unit of Marines. And while they are an expensive choice for that, most of the time it's fine to send them there once I have all of my tunnel markers made. So they are just a useful kind of multi-tool. They're not the best unit. They only hit on 3s, but in this detachment, they do reroll hit rolls of 1, and they are still twin linked with AP2 damage too. So they are still a useful unit. All right, we've got the 1 unit of Zoanthropes. We've spoken about them. And then we get to the meat of the list, which is 3 Molochs and 1 Screamer Killer. Let's talk about the Screamer Killer first. What the Screamer Killer does in this unit is he gives me another block of beef. That gives me access to yet another battle shock. So he comes out of the tunnel, because remember, normally he would have to come out of strat reserve, but since in this detachment he can come out of the tunnel, so he can just teleport up the battlefield, which is amazing. Then, if there's that one unit that I really needed them to fail their battle shock, and they didn't fail on the shadows, they didn't fail on their normal battle shock step, he gives me yet another try to give them another battle shock at -1. Sometimes you need the unit to fail the battle shock, and that's what he's there for. He gives me yet another chance to battle shock my opponent. And then when he charges in, he's still a 2-up armor save T9 monster that has 10 attacks at AP2 damage 3. Pretty dang good. I have him run into like a big Chaos Knight when I'm playing like triple despoiler Chaos Knights. I get that Chaos Knight battle shocked via any of the a million mechanisms I have to battle shock my opponent. The Screamer Killer goes up to strength 11 because I'm next to a Synapse unit, or within 6 of the Synapse unit, and I've got tons of Synapse in this army, so it's easy to make that happen. Then suddenly he's wounding that big Tyrant, or that big Knight on 3s, because he goes up strength 11, wounding on 4s, +1 to wound, because I'll be within range of the Neurolictor. It really makes it much easier to get through these big targets that a lot of times people are not comfortable trying to get through. All right, then lastly, and he's also great into elite infantry and stuff. He's great for that. Lastly, we've got the 3 Molochs. The 3 Molochs are what really makes the army operate. You don't have to have 3. I take 3 because I think that's one of the most undercosted data sheets in the game, especially in this detachment. These guys create a 12-inch aura of mortals. A 12-inch aura of mortals when they come out of Deep Strike. Now, you can't do this mortal if you give them the 6-inch Deep Strike out of the tunnel markers, so it needs to be a good 9-inch Deep Strike. But it's a 12-inch diameter of, well, I guess it's a lot more than that because I think their base is, it's a huge diameter of mortals on the battlefield. This unit makes it so that your opponent can't screen because in the when you deep strike them down, they're going to hit everything, and that's going to kill one or two models. If you're playing elves, it's going to kill lots of models. When you're killing marines, maybe it kills one model. And then you do it again, and then you do it again. You do it 3 times. That's effectively going to be up to 3d3. Sometimes you'll roll a 1, which means nothing will happen. Sometimes you roll a 5, which means it's flat 3 mortal wounds and a battle shock. This will eliminate all of your screens in the movement phase, which means then you or severely dampen the screens, right? Then that will allow your 6-inch deep strikes to 6-inch deep strike even closer. You bring the Molochs down first. You try to whittle down the screens as much. You probably won't 100% eliminate them, but you'll create holes in them dramatically. And then you can bring in the units after that with an even closer deep strike because it's still in the movement phase. So their screening is now deplenished, and you can get into the juicy targets that you really want to get into. When you take 3 Molochs, you basically automatically win against all forms of elves. Elves actually have like 0 gameplay into this list. It's almost impossible for them to win. And it becomes very, very challenging for a lot of other armies. I've played into several scrims right now with the WTC teams running into the Ultramarines with Victrix spam and stuff. These Molochs come down. They just cause so many mortals. They're going to kill like 2 Victrix on average, which is brutal for your opponent each time they come down. One of them, statistically, is going to force another battle shock test. It causes so much havoc and so much trauma. Not to mention, Molochs are a T10 monster. After your opponent has dealt with all of your big threats, they still have to chew through these T10 OC4 monsters, which you can make synapse. It's a problem for them to actually deal with. So now I'm going to go to the TTS screen, and I'm going to quickly show you how I want to maneuver up the battlefield, and then we'll start wrapping this video up, okay? As promised, here we go, TTS screen. Boom. Okay, cool. So if I'm playing on like a Search Enter Story 3, guys, if you know this is just the one that I use to demo because I like to keep things consistent on the channel. So I tend to use this mission, this just for examples. On this map, we know that this is where our opponent wants to stage, and we know that this is where our opponent, or that this is where we want to stage. So we're going to stage here and here. Our opponent's going to be staging here and here. If you've never watched my videos on staging, go watch those to understand what I'm talking about. But just as a brief, quick update. A staging point is just a place where you can stand safe from shooting, yet you're still able to extend your influence on the battlefield. That's what a staging point is. Now, what Subterranean Assault does, when our opponent, let's say we have our opponent that has some really, really strong units here, and they desperately don't want our zone tropes to be able to teleport down here and kill them, right? So what they're doing is they're putting their trash unit right here. And the trash unit has a big 9-inch deep strike, which means that I can't shoot their relevant elite infantry or tanks right here with my zone throbes. Well, what I can do with a Moloch is a Moloch. Let me just show you how ludicrous this is. Our Moloch can come down right here. And I'm actually going to, I need to load in another unit just so I can, here, we'll do it like this. Let's say we have a big Lancer that we need to kill. And our opponent is screening with scouts. Let's say, so our opponent has scouts sitting right here. Boom. So they've got this 9-inch deep strike denial right here. Well, I can actually bring this Moloch down here, hit the scouts, and hit the Lancer at the same time. If this is elves, you'll kill half the squad. But if it's marines, maybe you'll kill 1 model. Maybe you won't. So you roll a 1 on this one. Okay, so nothing happens to them, and then the Gladiator Lancer will suffer 1 mortal wound. Now, it doesn't seem like that's very much, right? But then we do it again. Stay outside of 9 here. Right here. So now this one will hit the scouts. It hits. 1 scout dies. It hits the Gladiator Lancer. Oh, it doesn't. So now nothing happens. But now what I've done is I have created a tunnel markers. Once these tunnel markers have been made, now my scouts don't screen 9. Now my scouts can only screen 6. Which means now I have the ability to drop my zone throbes right here. And once my zone throbes drop right here, one thing I can promise you is that they're going to murder the crap out of a Gladiator Lancer. And wherever my Neuro Tyrant is, he's probably going to come here and murder the crap out of some scouts. We'll just do like something like this. So he can drop here. I can murder the scouts with the Neurothrope, and then I can shoot the Gladiator Lancer. So this is how you set it up. Reroll 1s, because that's what they do. Now these are going to be supposed to sustain and lethals, and now you're wounding on 3s or 2s, depending on if that thing's battle shocked. That's going to be minimum. It's like 6 last cannon shots with no cover. So he just took 5d6 plus 5 damage. And you blow up the lighting on the lancer. It's brutal. It's a big problem. So I get to climb up the battlefield like this. Now let's say he also has a bunch of infantry that stays here that I don't want charging into my zone throws. Well, no problem, because I'm about to drop down a big unit of hyper-adapted Raveners that have now a 6-inch deep strike that's going to immediately charge in, because I'm going to come out of this tunnel marker that I'm about to spawn. It's a very big deal. This is how you climb up the battlefield. When you do this correctly, you can create such overwhelming pressure for your opponent that your opponent just loses. If I'm playing against elves, I can get 3 Molochs with this 12-inch aura to hit like 2 or 3 or 4 different elf units. And effectively, each unit is going to suffer like just 3 mortal wounds. And then, all right, so that would be 9 mortal wounds on a unit right there if that roll went. So you can just see like how devastating these Molochs truly can be, which whittles everything down. And when you roll the 5 or 6, it also forces another battle shock, which is just bonus Gucci. So the Molochs enable your deep strikes and they cause havoc. And then every single turn, they're going to do it again because you're going to uppy downy 2 of them, and you're just going to do it again, and you're just going to do it again, and you're just going to do it again. Not to mention one other thing about the Moloch is that when they rapid ingress, they still do their ability. Causing mortal wounds. Let's say your opponent is about to charge you with their 1 wound left Big Knight. They come in, Big Knight dies. It's brutal. It's such a big deal what these Molochs can do. Okay, so that's how I like to climb up the battlefield. Let's talk about some of the last things that we need to talk about for this detachment, and then I'm going to let you guys go. Back to PowerPoint. I got like maybe 3 more minutes with you. Stay here. I'm going to give you the keys to success with this army. The keys to success is your Molochs. The mortal wound output that they have is absolutely oppressive for any 1 wound army. If you are going into anything like Imperial Guard, the Molochs just give you yet another opportunity to create even more battle shocks, even though I know it's not reliable. It's only 33% of the time. But every time anything in that army gets battle shock, they lose their orders. It gives you yet another ability to cause battle shocks on anything in the game. It's still a T10 monster that only costs you 135 points that your opponent has to deal with. You can cause mortals with their rapid ingress with them. Your opponents in your army can kill absolutely anything in your army, but they're not going to be able to deal with everything. Your army is very squishy as a Subterranean Assault player. You're very squishy. They can kill you. But you hit unreasonably hard, and if you force them to deal with everything in your army, they can't. You also don't have to table them in turn 1. You can use Molochs to start sniping things with mortals. You can kill a Calidus with 2 Molochs. Very important to understand that how you just snipe off lone ops with your freaking auras. Swarm mentality. This is a massively aggressive list. You actually have to push yourself towards your opponent. You have to send. If you guys need inspiration for this, I'm going to link below a link to me on stream this past weekend where I was dismantling a Blood Angels list with this army. I'm going to show you exactly how I position. Go check it out so you can see how I climbed up the battlefield. It's absolutely brutal, and it's kind of unstoppable. Your lone ops that you have in this army are the things that are early holding your opponent's objectives, or that are holding the objectives, forcing your opponent to come up the battlefield into your embrace. Your Molochs kill all the screens, especially when you're looking at like your 1 wound models that are screening, whether it's going to be elves, guardsmen, ratlings, whatever. You hit your opponent before they hit you. Now, this army can struggle into heavy tanks, but if everything else is dead, it doesn't matter that the heavy tanks live, because the heavy tanks are not on the objectives scoring your opponent's points. And if they are, no problem. You're just going to be doing everything in power to battle shock them. If you do, that's great. If you don't, oh well. And then you're going to be hitting them with 6 sustained hits, lethal hits, ignoring cover las cannons. And then you're also going to be charging them with your hyper-adaptive Raveners who have anti-monster vehicle 5 up. And the normal Raveners who don't have it, doesn't matter. They still go to strength 6, which means they're still typically wounding things on 5s, occasionally wounding on 6s, and they're going to have sustained hits on it, and they're going to have twin links. So you're going to have the firepower to get through any big that does happen to get on objective. So you just can't play scared. You have to understand that when you choose to hit your opponent, that's when you're hitting your opponent. You got to hit your opponent crazy hard, and don't stop hitting them. Guys, this is Subterranean Assault. Play like this. Use my list as inspiration. If you like it, share with your friends. Like, subscribe, do all the stuff. And I hope you have a very blessed day. Crump on. Bye-bye.